Shane Borza to the HeartMind Happy Hour. Welcome everybody who is watching today. Thank you for being here. I am very excited today to have special guest, ultimate performance coach Shane Borza, who we have a mutual close friend who introduced us, and he is also a Human Potential Institute coach, graduate, very excited to have him here today to talk about psychological fitness, which I've had a chance to try a little bit about. And so I'm really excited to dive in deep with Shane and learn a little bit more. Before we do that, I want to just say this is HeartMind Happy Hour. This is, I'm your host, Holly Copeland. This is a show where I explore topics ranging from performance and neuroscience and brain health to consciousness and meditation and kind of anywhere in between that seems relevant. So it's pretty broad field, and had a lot of fun with various guests. So today we're moving over into the performance realm, but the topic we're going to talk about touches a lot on presencing and topics and interoception that are actually quite relevant in the world of meditation that I explore. So this is just a little bit more of that concrete side, or I'm going to say a little more, I don't know, performance oriented, but it's very much in line with a lot of those other ideas. And before we dive in, I always take a moment to just kind of get present. So ask that you close your eyes and come into a similar ground of being here. Take 3 deep breaths. Coming present in our bodies. Noticing what it feels like to be here at this time in this body. And then noticing the room that we're in. Feeling the alive and awake awareness that is present and here and always accessible to us. When we're ready, open our eyes and we can begin in a connected, grounded space. So welcome again, Shane Borza. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. I'm super excited and honored to be introduced to your tribe. So I think it's a great opportunity. Like you had said, we all have our own specialties and interests, but I think there's, just like people in general, especially right now, there's more that unites us than separates us, but quite often we'll kind of focus on the differences as opposed to the overlaps or the similarities. And especially with us coming from the same training background, I think that just like people that you went to school with, you all go off in your own directions, but if you trace it back, you find that there's this like unity and this commonality. And I think that that's super exciting. And I really am happy to see more of these things happening, not only these creations of groups and talks like you're doing now, but more connections. As you said, we were connected through a friend who is from the same school. So again, we didn't know each other, but we have this commonality, not only because we share people in common, but because we share that kind of system in common. And so I'm super thrilled to be a part of this community and to get to know you even better.
Thank you so much. And I equally am super thrilled to bring you and your wisdom and perspective and knowledge into this community to share and enrich the people here. So wonderful exchange of sharing. I'm really, really excited and honored to have you here sharing with us. Thank you. So you call yourself an ultimate performance coach. Your background is in, human potential certification. Do you want to just expand a little bit more on your background and where you came from and how you came to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So first, I have a virtual background up. So if I'm moving around and parts of me disappear, it's not your internet connection or anything. So I have been a mountain athlete my whole life, and I proudly say that I started climbing in 1989 just so I can have an 8 in the number instead of the 90s. Although I was probably 12 and all I did was go rappelling and climbing at the scout camp like one day that year. But I'm clinging to being a climber from the 80s. But that was my identity. And all through high school and college, and then afterwards, I was in the service, I worked in the police, I had a lot of kind of physical output in my life. And I very early on, like at 18, was outdoor coach. I was a guide, worked on ropes courses. I had all these different applications in helping people in a physical way. And through that, I learned a lot and taught a lot, but it was very much in the kind of athletic realm. I never taught in a classroom, and I didn't coach in a life coaching way. It was more of a physical sports performance way. But I also have a master's in human relations with a focus in education, and I had loved college, I'd loved study, I'd loved research. And so over the past 20 years I worked at a corporation for 10 years as a manager, and I managed small teams. I kept looking at these kind of two different aspects of my life, the physical and sport world, and then the kind of leadership, education, training, world, and saying, I wonder if there's a way to kind of, dip the chocolate in the peanut butter and have this amazing, unification. And my brother actually suggested life coaching. And so I went into doing some research, which, being totally anal about things, took like 2 years. And I'm a huge fan of both Strong First and Bulletproof. And Strong First is where I have all my training and background in being a specialist in programming, kettlebells, body weight training, that kind of thing. And Bulletproof is all my life hack, biohack, nutrition stuff. And so I found what is now the Human Potential Institute, but at the time was the Bulletproof Training Institute. And I said, hey, if I'm going to go to life coaching, I'm going to go through a program that I'm already a fan of. So I graduated, and then afterwards got my ICF certification, and then after that got my psychological fitness specialty. And so that has been kind of that's the quick encapsulation of like the last 20 years, but more specifically of how I went from predominantly being like a sports coach to being now a life coach. But that thread of helping people have their best performance, regardless of whether it's in corporate, in the service, on a playing field, in the mountains, whatever it was, I was able to kind of thread that all together and say, no matter who I work with, whether it's mental challenge or physical challenge, everybody wants to find that thing. How do I get 5% better output with 5% less input? And so that's been a big passion of mine, and that's why I call myself an ultimate performance coach.
Wonderful. Nice. Well, we share that love of Bulletproof, and I came to from that biohacking world, which is why I too chose Human Potential Institute. So yeah, very much resonates. So the psychological fitness specialty, tell us a little bit about what that is and how you got into it. When you and I were talking on the phone, there were some things you said about that really resonated about mind-body connections that drew you into psychological fitness. Do you want to start there by sort of what was it that made your eyes light up, and what's the essence of what it is?
So being a climber for almost 30 years now, one of the things that I really enjoy about it is I always call it chess for the body, because it's super physical, but it's so much about problem solving. And a lot of the problem you're solving is dealing with fear, and also unlocking the kind of sequence of, what move do I do with what part of my body, when and where. And one of the things I've always been fascinated by is, if you have a rope on and you feel super safe, it's much easier to apply your kind of logic of figuring out that puzzle, because you're not overwhelmed or preoccupied with, I don't have a rope, I'm worried about getting hurt or falling or dying or whatever your fear is. And so I said, it's so interesting that if only I could like flip myself from my intuition or my problem solving is overwhelmed by my emotion, then I'd very easily figure out this problem. But then there's other times where I'm so in my head trying to figure something out that I'm like, if only I could flip from like intellectually trying to fill in the blank to like clicking into this intuition, or it's this like deep knowing that I have in myself, but like I don't know how to do that. And so that fascination of trying to unlock, like, well, the screwdriver isn't working, maybe I try a hammer. Like if it's a toolbox, it's really easy to put down one tool and grab another. But if it's our internal parts, for some of us, it's very difficult to know how to switch from one part of ourselves to the other. So when psychological fitness was announced and they talked about, so one of the things they say is it helps to align the different aspects of your inner self. And so I said, oh, this is like having all of those systems come online. And then you have the choice of, when you turn your computer on, all the programs are available to you. But if the computer's off, then none of them are available to you. So I'm like, oh, if only I could take this class and then learn how to basically make all those programs available, all that different stuff inside me. And so that's what led me to taking the class. And the thing, just like you'll know about going through HPI coach training, is it's very experiential. And you do that deep work on yourself, and you have a lot of frustrations, but also aha moments. And so my goal with psychological fitness is to help other people so that I can kind of guide them through those tough times, so that way they can unlock those aha moments for themselves and then kind of go forward as their whole self and then have their kind of peak performance arise from that.
Fantastic. And we're going to do some psychological fitness experiential practice today, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. The rock climbing analogy works really well for me because I'm a rock climber too. And I have noticed similar things. One thing I really noticed about rock climbing, was just how it brings you into presence, because you have to be 100% present in order to climb, especially when you're lead climbing. It's like you just like razor in. I mean, it's amazing how and actually now with the other Buddhist Mahamudra and other practices what I would actually say now is it turns on your awake awareness instantly, because you have to, because all of a sudden you're so aware that you could fall and get hurt. So brilliant. Okay. Well, how would you like to, where do you usually begin by describing it? Because I think today the intent is actually to give people some feeling for what it is, and how you use it as a coaching tool.
Yeah. Well, to expand on what I was saying earlier about having all the systems come online, I really like to, I had actually, I was on a webinar and I had someone talking about the three brains, or the multi-brains of the body. And, we tend to think that, like, well, our brain is our mind. It's in our head, like that's the brain. But as you know from Dave Asprey Bulletproof, he talks a lot about how there's more information sent from the gut up to the brain than there is from the brain down. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people now are talking about the gut as the second brain. Mm-hmm. But really we have these three main centers, which is the thoughts we think, which is the cerebral part of us, the brain, the feelings we feel, which is most generally thought of as the heart area, and then the gut. And so I talk a lot about psychological fitness being a way to tap into the head, heart, and gut. And some people are open and receptive to all three. Some are only open to two, and some might only have one. And some people will have a lot of resistance around those other aspects. So if someone's really cerebral, for instance, they might discount feelings and emotions and what they can learn from them. And the opposite's also true. Some people are very intuitive, they're really in touch with their feelings, they are very receptive to other people's feelings, and they don't necessarily think that kind of having any intellect or or deep thought or rumination or study or data is necessarily important. But really it's the balance of those things. And it's interesting because even in our society, we have things like these expressions. People will say, oh, so-and-so's up in their head, or, oh, it was a gut instinct. So we talk about these things, but we're not necessarily utilizing them. And so that's kind of the basis of psychological fitness, is having people come in, regardless of which one they're in, and enabling them to realize, like, oh, there's more than, it's like that old expression, if all you have is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. But what we want to do is put more tools in that toolbox. So that way you have options and you can say, okay, maybe I default to being in my head, but that doesn't mean that's the only way to look at this problem.
Yeah. And to add to your, there's more energy that goes from or messages, signals that go from your gut to your brain. The same is true for your heart as well. In fact, 60 times more messages go from your heart to your brain than your brain to your heart. Mm-hmm. And really, I think, when I did this experience with Dr. Mark Atkinson that developed it, it was really an exercise in interoception. It's an exercise in dropping down out of your head and accessing the innate intelligence within your body. With your awareness, centering your awareness in your heart and accessing the awareness that's already there. It's centering your awareness into your gut and accessing the innate awareness that's already there, was my sort of experience of what he was teaching. Is that jive with what you understand, experience?
Yes, and it's very much like the when you talk about the body, you can break it down into pieces, but really it's all connected. So a finger is separate from the hand, but it's also part of the hand. You can't make a fist without the fingers, but you need the palm in order for the fingers to curl around. So you can separate out the head and the heart and the gut and all of these things, but really they're designed to work together. And it's interesting, the more I dive into my Strong First training, which is all about functional movement and minimalist fitness, the more I find, oh, these are the same lessons as psychological fitness, just the terminology is different or the perspective is different. And one of the things in psych fitness is about shaking, and it's learning how to use movement to kind of drop your stress and like literally shake the tension out of your body. Well, they teach that in Strong First. And one of the things that they talk about is, developing full body tension so that when you're picking up weights or moving weights, there's a support structure. So for instance, if you're pressing weight overhead and your core is soft and your legs are bent, it's going to be very hard to push that weight. But if your legs are locked and your whole body is like in a standing plank position, then you have this really strong foundation to propel the weight up. But then when you put the weight down, you want to recover as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is to release all the tension. And so how do you do that? You shake.
Yeah.
Well, in psychological fitness, we talk about the same thing. If you're super stressed out and you're trying to find a solution, or you're trying to not, fall into a fight or yelling or throwing things, slamming the door, whatever your stress reaction normally is, you need to dump that tension. How do you dump the tension? The easiest way to do it is to shake it out. And so starting to see these parallels is another reason why I call myself an ultimate performance coach, because I found that the similarities between people, whether they're dealing with a home situation or an office or a work situation, is the same thing as athletes. You see athletes on the side of the field, and they're bouncing around and they're shaking their arms and legs and they're trying to stay loose, they're trying to stay warm, but they're also trying to regulate their stress before they go on to the field and compete, because they want to stay calm. And it's difficult to be standing in a boardroom giving a presentation and be bouncing up and down and like, I'm just trying to stay calm. But you could probably do that in your office beforehand. So the output is different. One person's giving a presentation in a high stress environment. The other person is competing on the field in a high stress environment, but the environments are the same and the output's the same. You want all of your systems online and to have the output be at the highest possible level whatsoever. Yeah. And all that comes from those same tools. So again, people can come in from all these different backgrounds and all these different perspectives, and still use those same tools, just like anyone can use a hammer or a screwdriver. It doesn't matter what the job is they're using it for. They just need the right tool to do the job.
Do you teach people about some of the, things that are going on when they're shaking, the nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system activation and vagus nerve? And do you find yourself going into that, or is it not necessary?
Well, I'm kind of a minimalist when it comes to things. And so, but also I found that universal themes are more applicable to most people. So rather than kind of getting into, I mean, I love to geek out on this stuff, but I don't think you necessarily need to. It's one of those things that I had someone tell me once, like, I don't need to know how my cell phone works. I just need to know if it's working or not. And so I think my job is to help people have options. And one of the things with psych fitness is to kind of say, okay, here's a number of tools. Which one lights you up? Like, that's the one for you. And part of that is this, again, I talked about earlier, like our coach training, it's this experiential work where you say, okay, let's see which one of these 10 things is the thing that lights you up. Because if you're just doing it like, well, he said to do it for a week, so I'm doing it for a week. But if it's this kind of drudgery, sometimes it'll lead to a breakthrough, and it takes some time to happen, and you go, oh. But if it's just, I'm doing it because they said to do it, you may not be served by that. But finding the thing that lights the person up, to me, is more important than kind of breaking down all the systems and how it works. But again, if that's something that lights them up, then I'm more than happy to go into a deep dive with them and be like, oh boy, this is so awesome. But if they're just kind of like, hey, shaking's cool, that really helps, thank you. I'm like, awesome. I'm so glad that, that spoke to you. I do want to go back. One of the things you had asked about at the beginning is kind of where I start with people. And one of the things, and you probably heard Dr. Mark talk about this, is these aren't like assignments. A lot of times in school or any kind of a training course, we default to this like, oh, I have to remember this because it's important, or I need to know the verbatim of what the thing is so that I can replicate it. And one of the things Dr. Mark talks about is this isn't something to do or to memorize or to know. It's something to be experienced. And I like to take that a step further and say, come in without any judgment, either for yourself or for the practice. And one of the things that really lit up for me is I did keto for almost 10 years. And a lot of it was very mysterious. They would talk about kind of feeling the energy being projected at you from your opponent. And at first you're like, this is woo-woo BS. Like, what are you talking about? But after you start to develop those things, then you start to be like, oh my God, I felt the energy coming at me from my opponent. How did this happen? And you're like, no, it's been happening the whole time. You just didn't notice, or you weren't receptive to it. It's not that it appeared out of thin air. It's that, you're slowly tuning your dial in so you can like hear this other channel. And so I always try to lead with that and say, rather than say, this is the lesson, and now that I know it, my life's going to change. Like, well, it might not. Don't come in with that expectation or that weight. But also don't discount and say, this won't work, because you're going to manifest that. And like, it won't work. Why? Well, because you're not allowing yourself to see it as a solution. So I always ask everyone to come into psych fitness as like, I'm interested in this. I'm going to experience all the things. And then I'm going to think about it and kind of see like what resonates. And if anything does, then I say, let's dive deep on that.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I love your Aikido story and analogy for sure. Well, so we're talking about all this experiential. I bet people that are watching are like, well, what do you mean? What is it? So can you share a practice with us? Can you take the audience through something?
Yeah, of course. So one of the things that we talk about a lot, and this is one of the first steps, is welcoming. And that could be welcoming the thoughts you're feeling. It could be welcoming the emotions that are coming up for you. It could be this kind of gut instinct. We all have these kind of inner dialogues that come up. And quite often they're judgments where we'll kind of argue with ourselves, like, I want to do this, no, you don't. Oh, I don't want to do this, yes, you do. And we get into this like conflict almost, and this war inside. And sometimes this kind of spiral or loop happens where we find ourselves like, oh, I've been thinking about this all day, or I can't stop thinking about this. And rather than go into conflict with those things, what we try to do is teach you to say, let's just take a breath and go, okay, what am I thinking or feeling? And sometimes it takes you a few minutes to identify what it is. But if you don't welcome it in, then, and again, this is another thing, we talk about this all the time. People talk about bottling it up, stuffing it down, not dealing with it, locking it up. Rather than doing that, what if you invited it in? What if you said, I've got a lot of stress around this. I've got a lot of emotional energy around this thing or this person. I can say for myself, I have spent a lot of time trying to deal with this old relationship where I still, in my head, say, well, I've forgiven them for that. It's fine. But emotionally, I feel, even just now, just saying it, I feel this charge come up where emotionally I'm like, nope. You're saying it, but what you're feeling and what you're saying are disconnected. And so if I can welcome that, I can go, okay, you're coming up. Why are you coming up? And what's coming up for me emotionally is like, you don't believe that. That's not true. And again, I can then say, no, it is true because I said it. But again, right now, I just had that come up again. And even though I'm using this example, like, I'm feeling it in reality. And it's saying, no, you haven't. You're still feeling it. So I encourage you all to take a moment, and I really liked that you presenced us all at the beginning. So I'd like to invite everyone to just take a moment and rather than consciously closing your eyes, just allow them to close if they want to. And just breathe and welcome whatever you're feeling. It could be that you don't believe any of the things I'm talking about and you think it's total woo-woo nonsense. It could be that you're preoccupied with something that happened in your life before you even got on the call. Whatever it is that you're thinking or feeling or that intuitive deep knowing, say to it, I see you, I welcome you. And then if you can, try and identify what it is. What is this thought? What is this that I'm feeling? Just like with people, if we can name them, then we can start to recognize them and build a relationship with them. So just take another moment, really reach out intellectually, emotionally, intuitively to whatever this thing is for you. I see you, I welcome you. And whenever you're ready, just take a breath and come back to the space.
Oh, thank you, Shane. I love that practice, and I think that it is a natural way of helping people start to see the witness, start to put some space between their thoughts and their, higher mind. And as well as start to cultivate non-judgmental, mindfulness, being aware on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. So it's naturally kind of incorporating all those things by asking that simple question. Um, so or act of welcoming, of inviting people to welcome and kind of question, what is it? What is this thought or feeling? So,
Mhm.
um, yeah,
And again, a lot of these things are built into our culture, and we do them all the time to everyone else, but it's seldom that we do them for ourselves.
right.
Most people would say, oh, well, I have to act professionally. And that means smiling at people, acknowledging people, saying hi, how are you, shaking hands, hugging people, calling people by name, addressing people. All of those things we do on a daily basis all the time. We put a smile on, we give people eye contact. That's all welcoming behavior to other people. So they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel recognized. But that's all external. Imagine if that was all directed internally so I'm 45, so to the 45 years of thoughts, feelings, and intuition, a lot of which is stuck, pushed down, locked away. Imagine if I welcomed all of that,
Yeah,
opened it, and allowed all of it to help me all the time in everything I do.
it's beautiful. Imagine that simple, as you say, how you would greet somebody, and you turn around and do that same practice to yourself in the kind, loving way that you would do to, greet, I don't know, the doorman or the checkout person or whomever you're being polite to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
and
we are.
it's profound. Again, it sounds silly, and it sometimes sounds easy,
Mhm.
but again, as you know from HPI, a lot of and again, there's a difference between something being easy and something being simple.
Mhm.
And that's, again, something I learned through Strong First. So they even have a program called Simple and Sinister. It's literally 2 exercises and that's it. But it's extremely difficult, but it is very simple, not unlike the psychological fitness stuff. And that's where having this program and going through it myself and learning how to teach it was so beneficial because I went through it. And that's how you learn to teach it, is by experiencing it yourself and understanding the value. And again, those simple things, I have a slideshow for this I do for presentations. And it's like, so psychological fitness is these 8 things. And there you go. Really, I can explain them if you want, and now you can do it. But it's unpacking them, it's individualizing them, it's having the kind of structure of, I'm going to teach this to you, I'm going to help you learn it, we're going to talk about what the experience was of doing it. It's making it a practice, it's the accountability, it's the building. It's just like a house. It doesn't matter if you have a prefabricated house and someone comes in and drops it down. There's a lot of prep that goes in before that house shows up. You have to clear the space, you have to build a foundation, you have to put a road in, you have to make sure all the utilities are set up, even if the house is ready to go and they just pick it off a truck and drop it down. There's still a lot of work that has to happen beforehand, much less a regular house that has to be built piece by piece. And the same is true of all of us. Putting in all that foundational work allows you to then build that house on top. And just like a house, if you have a bad foundation, the most beautiful house ever is going to slowly start to lean and sink, and then everything is off.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. And I'm so with you there on simplicity. I greatly appreciate simplicity too. So I appreciate that aspect of this. Um, would you, we didn't talk about this exercise, but I loved this exercise when Dr. Atkinson led it. I'm wondering if you would lead the heart-centered knowing of the room, sort of the looking out from the heart as opposed to looking out from your mind. Would you guide that one?
Well, my version of that, I call it heart breathing.
Okay, great. Please.
So one of the things to preface this, and you did some breathing at the beginning, is there, just like movement practices, there are all kinds of breath practices that you can do. And some will speak to people more than others. Some might make you feel differently than others. Excuse me. One of the things that's been profound for me is learning how to breathe into different parts of myself and how that can elicit a hugely different response. And when you talk about kind of like looking at the room from your heart, that's one of the things that heart breathing has done for me. So what I would invite everyone to do is allow your eyes to close and follow some of this breathing with me. And at first, we're just going to take a few breaths. Mindful, in, out, slowing the breath, breathing deeper. And now we're going to start being conscious of, where are you breathing in? Is it your chest? Is it your stomach? Really think, where is the breath going? Regardless of where it is, try and drop it down. Take a hand, or maybe both, and place them on your belly. Could be anywhere. Try and breathe into that space. Allow your hands to be a focus. We all try so hard to have these tight bellies, but right now we're going to soften. We're going to breathe deep. And to try to feel our breath drop down into our hands and allow our bellies to move in and out as the breath fills that space. Really engage, dropping down as low as you can. Now allow your hands to fall away and see if you can still breathe into that deep, low space without your hands as a focus. Softening, breathing into the belly. And now, while we're in this calm space, I invite you to place your hands over your heart, wherever that is for you, wherever you identify as your heart area. Allow them to be your focus. Bring the breath from your belly into your heart. Feel your hands expand your chest as your heart fills with your breath. Feel your heart filling up, breathing in, filling your heart with thoughts and feelings, positivity, energy, whatever it is that you want to focus on filling your heart with. Fill, expand. Feel your shoulders drop and open. Feel your chest rising and falling with your breath. Feel your heart as your center. Relax your hands and allow them to fall away. And see if you can still breathe into your heart as you were before. filling, expanding, radiating out into the world from your heart. When you're ready, take a few breaths, relaxed, no effort or trying, and then join me back in this space.
Admit I didn't really want to join back, but I'm hosting, so I guess I have to. I'm like, bye everyone. I'm doing heart breathing.
Well, I'm glad that lit you up.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
The reason I start with the belly is a lot of this is kind of old hat for us that have studied, but for some people, just identifying with their breath is new and different and difficult. And I found it's very easy for people to kind of go, okay, well, I'll put my hands in my belly, and sometimes you'll have people do an exercise and put a hand in their chest and a hand in their belly and say, okay, breathe, and they feel their chest rise and fall, and their belly doesn't move. And you say, okay, let's try to have the opposite happen. And your chest doesn't move, and your belly moves in and out. And then they say, oh, so that's belly breathing. So starting with belly breathing and then moving into the heart, but then also comparing and contrasting the experience. So I'd like to ask you, did you feel a difference breathing into your belly as opposed to breathing into your heart? And if so, what was it?
I did feel a difference. For me, gut-centered breathing is, I'm pretty energized at my heart. And so there's more energy around breathing in my heart, and it has an emotional quality. I mean, actually the quality of love and joy I can feel when I'm breathing. And I don't, and breathing in my heart and my gut is more of like a peace feeling, I would say, sort of like a peaceful serenity. So they are quite different, actually. Mm-hmm. What do you feel when you do the two?
Breathing into my belly gets me very grounded. Mm-hmm. It calms me way down. I get nice and slow. And coming out of a martial arts background, I do all my breathing in gratitude in Seiza, which is kneeling position. So I'm literally like as low as I can get, other than laying down. But I just feel really rooted. And that's another thing they talk about in Aikido, is rooting your feet into the ground and like pulling the energy of the earth up through your feet into your center. And in Aikido, your center is 2 fingers below your belly button. And so when I put my hands on my lower belly, that's where I put them, because it's kind of a default from my martial arts training. And so it gets me into that kind of really low, base-centered, grounded self. And when I breathe into my heart, I feel like it's like this explosion. It's like I'm opening not to be graphic, but it's like I feel like I'm pulling my chest open and just being like, letting the like heart spotlight just blast this light all over the place. And I quite often so my wife will come into the room and she won't say anything. And then afterwards, she's like, what were you grinning about? And I'm like, what are you, I wasn't grinning. I was like heart breathing. And she's like, you're like beaming. And I've realized now that that's my default. It's belly breathing for me is getting grounded, and heart breathing for me is like falling into joy.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. I say different words, but similar concepts in terms of how I felt. Breathing into joy. I love it. That's awesome. That's really beautiful.
And again, the thing that I am trying to impress upon people is, your version and my version aren't necessarily different. It's just we're coming at that from different perspectives. We have different backgrounds. We're using different terminology. But quite often our experiences, maybe not the same, are similar.
Absolutely.
And that coming in as this experiential experience to be experienced, as Dr. Mark talks about it, is something we can all do if only we would let ourselves. And then, just like anything else, we could all go to a concert, we could all go to work, we could all go to a family reunion, we could all go to an accident site. We're all going to walk away from those places with our personal experience. And all you need to do anywhere you go, anytime you interact with anyone, is allow your experience to be experienced. Rather than showing up and say, I haven't been to this concert, but I don't really want to go. I'm only going because you want to go, because I don't like this band, and tonight's going to be terrible. Well, you already had the experience. You're telling yourself how it's going to be before you even go. So how are you possibly able to have the present experience in the moment when you already had the experience you've decided beforehand? So whether it's psychological fitness, working with a coach, a trainer, a mentor, a therapist, be aware of your feelings and your emotions and your intuition. Be present, be in the moment, and allow the experience to unfold for you. Welcome it. It all comes from welcoming. Everything else builds upon that. Welcoming in this is the foundation. If you want that beautiful house, you have to have a strong foundation. So learning how to welcome the different parts of you, the different parts of your life, the different people in your life will enable you to have this really strong foundation, and then you can build the beautiful house.
Beautifully said. Beautiful. Yeah. And, you know, for me, that's the essence of what you just described as the essence of mindfulness. I mean, that is the essence of living life fully in the present moment, non-judgmentally, you know, allowing being in the experience without judgment, truly. Like, don't bring your past. Why are you bringing your past into the experience? You know, just be with what is happening and fully experience that, and watch the process, watch what arises, watch what unfolds. Notice all the time. Put your attention on noticing, not on analyzing, or bringing something from your past to make it relevant, relative. Naming and conceptualizing. Just experience it. It's, I think for me, that is a lot of the essence of living in flow. There's right there is living that way of being, whether you call it welcoming or mindfulness or flow, or it's great that we have so many names for it, because then we can speak to different people and what works for them. What language do they need to access that beautiful ground of being?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It always reminds me of, and I can't remember if this was Huckleberry Finn or one of the other books, but the boys they find this French book, and one of them is trying to explain to the other one, why do they say this? And they're like, well, that's how the French people say it. And he's like, well, why don't they just say it? And he's like, well, that's how they say it. And the other, so they're arguing back and forth about, like, there's different ways to say the same thing. And the other one's like, well, if what they're saying means what I'm saying, then why don't they say it the way I say it? And I always just laugh, because the more I learn about coaching and the more work I do, the more I'm like you just said, it's like, well, when it comes to language, we all logically understand, like, oh, they're from a different country, they speak a different language. Like, we need to translate in order to communicate. Like, that is logical. But when it comes to practices, then all of a sudden these lenses and guards and viewpoints and everything come. Like, well, I'm not going to bother to put in the work to figure out that you and I are saying the same thing in different words, because I have this belief that my words are correct and your words are incorrect. And so I'm not even going to exchange with you. But again, imagine if you welcomed like, oh, I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling guarded, or I'm feeling judged. Okay, so I'm going to become aware of that. I'm going to welcome those feelings in. And then perhaps I even say out loud, much less inside, like, I'm feeling a lot of judgment come up. Can we talk this through and figure out, like, why are you calling it that? Oh, because blah, blah, blah. Oh, now I realize we're saying the same thing. But again, if you don't welcome that, then we're not going to be able to have a dialogue and move forward and realize, oh, we're actually together on this and not opposed.
Yeah. To me, that comes from a basic premise of viewing life as like looking for the commonality, not looking for the differences. I mean, just seek out the commonality, because I think that it's obvious. We're far more common than we are different, and the threads of commonalities run incredibly strong. So, we can seek out the commonality. And yeah, I think I love your story about a language, and yeah, I think it's so right on. Well, there we are at an hour. I can't believe that time flew. It has been such a joy to have you here, Shane, to walk us through psychological fitness and take us through some practices. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm inspired and excited by what you're doing. And thank you for the work that you do. It's awesome.
Well, as I said at the beginning, I'm really thrilled and honored to be on your show, and I hope that people found some connection with some of the things that I talked about, but also some value in the kind of exercises we went through. And if anyone's interested in learning more about what I do, they can go to my website. It's my name, shaneborza.com. And actually, like to, if you don't mind, I was going to offer anyone who's on the Facebook Live, if you contact me, you're interested in, I do coaching and mentoring. I teach psychological fitness, but I also work with people one-on-one and kind of a lifer mentor coach capacity. I'd love to offer a 2-for-1 for anyone from this call. So that could be I do monthly and quarterly packages. So it could be pay for a month, get a month, or it could be 2 people split a month, and you would each get a month for the price of one. So I'd like to offer that to your people and to your tribe so that they can hopefully engage in something that might allow them to move forward and grow.
Oh, wow. That's an awesome offer. Thank you. How generous of you. That's really exciting. So cool. Yeah. Well, there you have. You can find Shane at his website, shaneborza.com. You said, I'll say it again. And awesome. And you can find more about the work that I do, coaching work, at HeartMindAlchemy.com. And I'll also say that if anybody is interested in supporting these conversations and the work that it takes to produce the show, or you just love this show and you want to kind of throw a few bucks in the hat, you can go to my Patreon website to support the show, patreon.com/HeartMindAlchemy. And thank you everybody who's been here or who will come and watch later. It is quite an honor to do these shows. I really enjoy doing them, and I'm inspired by the comments and the feedback I get. So thank you everybody for being here. And thank you again, Shane, for your time today.